Oh, the clock on the computer says 7 o'clock. That one's a little slow. I call the meeting to order. I'd like to offer up a moment of silence. We had 2 residents that were killed in an automobile accident just over on Austin Street last night. So we could just have a moment of silence to think about those folks. Thank you. Moving on the agenda, we're up to item 2 from old business. It's the oath of office. At their February 15, 2022 meeting, the EDA recommended the reappointment of Julie Lux to the authority. On February 28, 2022, the City Council confirmed the reappointment of Julie Lux to the EDA for a term of 6 years, expiring on January 31st, 2028. State Statute 358.05 requires that each reappointed and newly appointed official be installed by taking the oath of office. Statute 358.06. Ms. Lux will take her oath of office and be seated as reappointed member. Julie, would you please take the oath of office for us?
I would be glad to. I, Julie Lux, do solemnly swear to support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Minnesota, and to discharge faithfully the duties as a member of the City of East Bethel Economic Development Authority in the County of Anoka and the State of Minnesota, to the best of my judgment and ability, so help me God.
Thank you, Julie.
All right.
Is there a motion to adopt tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
I was absent from that.
Thank you. Okay, well, there's a motion and a second to adopt tonight's agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
3 ayes, 1 abstention. So do we need to, because we don't have 4 ayes, Jack, do we need to move that over?
No, it's the majority of those.
Of the quorum? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Item 4, Finley Engineering Broadband Internet Study Update. Chris?
As Mr. Konechny has until 7:05 to log in.
Okay.
I'd like to proceed with the next.
Item 5, Selection of 2022 Officers. Per EDA bylaws, the officers of the authority shall consist of a president, vice president, treasurer, assistant treasurer, and secretary. A commissioner must not serve as president or vice president at the same time. The EDA bylaws state the treasurer shall be the executive director of the authority, and that the executive director shall be the city administrator, and the assistant treasurer shall be the city finance director. The secretary does not have to be an EDA commissioner. And it is recommended that Carrie Frost, East Bethel Administrative Coordinator, be appointed to this position. 2021 officers were President Julie Lux, Vice President Tom Schultenberg, Treasurer Jack Davis, Assistant Treasurer Mike Jazarski, Secretary Carrie Frost. Recommendation that the staff elect a President, Vice President to serve from March 21st, 2022 through January 21st, 2023. I'll entertain a motion for recommendation for officers for next year.
Hi, Zach, can you guys hear me?
Yes, Chris, if you can hold on just 1 minute, we'll be right with you.
Okay, sounds good.
At this point, the chair would like to, I guess I'm not the chair, but I will make the recommendation that we approve Julie Lux, President, John Schulzenberg, Vice President, Jack Davis, Treasurer, Mike Jazorski, Assistant Treasurer, and Carrie Frost, Secretary. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Here you go.
Okay.
Commissioners, we have Chris Konechny online now, who's going to give us a report, a status report on the Finley engineering study to date. Chris, can I get you to turn your camera on?
I don't have one on this one. I'm at home here. So.
Okay, no problem. I'm going to turn it over to you, and if you can kind of give us a status update on the report, and then the commissioners may have some questions after you finish.
Absolutely. So we've been working on this study with CCG Consulting. Finley is the lead here, and we are an engineering company based out of Clayton, Minnesota. We do work nationwide, although most of our work is Minnesota, Iowa, Dakotas. And we've been doing a number of studies like this across Minnesota and other places as well. To get into it, the first thing that we really like to do with any one of these studies is to really take stock of what your situation is. We don't try to do any templated things. We really try to come into everything with an open mind to really figure out what's going on in your area and what's best for you. So the first thing we did was go out to a couple of the major mapping sources that are available out there. Number one would be the FCC's 477 data set, and we also look at the incumbent telephone carriers in there. You know, broadband was really born out of the telephone industry, and as voice has faded away and become kind of an ancillary product, those telephone incumbents often are the only or one of the major carriers still available in these areas. And then the other thing that we looked at was the Minnesota DEED data, Department of Economic Development. What we found is that using the city's GIS database, we found there's approximately 4,769 passings in the city. Passings just means establishments that would take a broadband connection, so homes, businesses, etc. And actually we found that the vast majority of them, you know, did have, by, you know, what the major benchmarks are today, what we would call acceptable broadband service. There's a lot of different benchmarks out there at the federal and state level. The most common one that relates to funding mechanisms right now seems to be the 100 by 20 megabit mark. So when I say 100 by 20 megabits, that's 100 megabits download and 20 megabits upload. That's enough for, you know, the vast majority of households to do work at home users, you know, homeschooling, education for the kids, that sort of thing. You know, not to say that there's not problems with certain networks in certain places, but, you know, if we look at the major providers in town, the telephone carriers are CenturyLink for the most part. There's a little bit of Frontier in the Northeast. And then really you've got a small amount of Comcast and MetroNet, and then really Midco, I would expect to have the lion's share of the customer base. In fact, out of that 4,769, there's only 313 locations today as we map it that do not have access to that 100 by 20 mark. And that is kind of not what we normally see in these studies. Normally it's far worse than that. So unfortunately, as far as outside funding mechanisms go, that's going to preclude a lot of that. So when we talk to all these providers, because we did reach out to Frontier, CenturyLink, and Midco as well, and we found that of those 313 passings, there's approximately 30 of them that are slated to get fiber either this year or next year from Midco through what's called the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. That was a program put on by the FCC last year to expand service to unserved and underserved areas across the nation. All those areas were won by Midco, and that's part of their near-term plans. And then there is another, I think 90 to 100 roughly passings that would get service from Midco Fiber as well. Those are either, you know, relatively new developments or areas where they're edging out their service today. So really, it's hard to see a path forward for a citywide fiber network. Midco is actively building fiber. A lot of that is, you know, unfortunately for you guys, mostly situated around areas of expansion where they have not been before. It's difficult to kind of make the business case to overbuild an area with fiber when you've probably already got the bulk of the customer base. You're not really, you're spending capital to not really gain any new revenue there. The other likely, you know, potential partner would be CenturyLink. They have been building fiber across Minnesota and the country, but probably at somewhat of a slower rate than Midco. You know, the thing to look at there is they are very focused on a per passing number. So, you know, I don't know exactly what that number is, but typically with the bigger companies, we see that kind of in the $3,000 to $5,000 range. Meaning that if they can't, you know, make that work on those numbers, they're going to move on to other areas. And where you see people get to that number is denser urban areas or, you know, high population growth suburb areas. And I don't think that you guys really would fit that mold. When we went out there and did our field visit, you're kind of in between, you know, construction method. So when we see areas that are primarily rural, you can really reduce a lot of your costs by using vibratory plow methods and keeping your costs down that way. And when you're in more urban areas, you have to do more directional bores and things of that nature. Obviously, the bore is much more expensive and the plow is less expensive, but when we looked at your guys' areas, there's a lot of narrow right-of-ways and things that would make that plowing very difficult, if not impossible. So, you know, I think looking to the future and looking at where you guys are, you know, we are seeing a fairly steady population rise in your area. And given that that's only likely to, you know, accelerate as we kind of see that urban sprawl kind of continue to uptake, I think staying in touch with all these providers and trying to do joint trench, open trench, conduit type projects when you're doing city, electric, water, sewer, road, you know, projects, that can all help dramatically lower those costs and something to kind of keep, you know, front of mind and stay engaged with all these providers, because that might just be enough of an incentive to kind of tip the scales to get that done. Given that we did have such a low percentage of the population, we did go ahead and kind of price a city limit wide fiber to the home network. And we came out at, I think it was 34.5 million roughly. And that would equate to about $7,200 to reach every home. And that's an all-in number. It's likely that existing providers such as CenturyLink and Midco have some localized backbone fiber that could drive the cost of that down pretty substantially, but it's not a for sure thing. So yeah, I guess with that I'll kind of open it up for questions. I feel like I'm kind of rambling here, so.
Chris, this is Julie Lux. Did we have some maps or visuals last time that kind of showed what the areas that Chris was talking about or what the coverage
Sure.
was? Or Chris, do you have any visuals for us?
Yeah, I've got some here handy. I'll see if I can bring them up here.
Okay, thank you.
Let me know when you guys can see my screen here.
Hang on just a minute.
Yes, got it.
Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thanks.
Okay. So these are, I apologize, these are kind of hard to see here, but, and these will all be included in the study. And I believe we just recently sent a draft of the report to Jack. So that you guys should be seeing that, you know, kind of a live version as well here shortly. This first map is what we got from the Department of Deed, and this shows the yellow is served areas that have that 100 by 20 level service. The blue is unserved, meaning that they have less than 25 by 3. And the purple is in between 25 by 3 and 100 by 20. So although this might look like a lot of, you know, not yellow area, unserved, underserved, the reality is that there's not very much population density in these areas. Therefore, you know, that's where we get that 300 and I think it's 83 locations that don't have service today. The next one I would show is these red areas around the city. These were pockets that Midco won in RDOF, and that's places they'll be bringing fiber to. So I think mostly it's a development, you know, around the Cedar Creek area, a little bit out here, and then a little bit in the south here and there. And then the last one I would show is the telco boundaries. This yellow is all CenturyLink, West, now Lumen, I believe. And then over here in the northeast, we have a little bit of Frontier off the Wyoming exchange. And then the last one would be, this is kind of the backbone of the fiber to the home network that we designed. We did have to get a little creative with locations of stuff just because of how the roads went on some of the eastern edges of the county, but basically that would take a fiber to every location within the county and pull them all back to a central location where we would house electronics there.
Chris, this is Dan Butler call. I have a question. Basically, it's more of a statement. So the bottom line is basically East Bethel's out of luck in terms of funding on this. Is that correct?
For what's available on the current horizon, outside funding is going to be a hard sell. One of the things that, and that's really what it boils down to, is exactly that. We did pull some speed test data, and it looks like the average speed test in your area is kind of anywhere from 60 by 10 to highest one I'm seeing is about 76 by 10. So it's possible that you could do some documentation to try to build a case that you don't have 100 by 20 services in the area. What you would need to do is a very large scale speed test survey where you have those tests tied to addresses and be able to plot those out on a map. Because really for right now, everything, or well, let's not call it everything, let's call it 90% of the federal funding mechanisms out there, or state funding mechanisms, are all pointed to the areas that have worse service than what you guys have. So
So
you would
that,
either be outright ineligible or, graded much lower than an area with worse service.
so I have a question on those speed tests. Is that fiber to the house, or is that fiber to the node that you're measuring the speed test at?
Those are all, I'd have to check with Doug to be sure, but I think those are Microsoft and Ookla. They're two national speed tests, so that's speed at the home. There's really no fiber, as part of the equation. This would be all what your residents are getting today on DSL or coax from Midco.
Well, I'm a Midco customer, and I know that you can, for an increased fee on your monthly service, get a higher speed. So I'm kind of wondering if the speeds that were tested at the households that they used were subscribing to a faster service or a slower service.
Yeah, it's really difficult to put a whole lot of stock in speed tests for a couple of reasons, and that's probably number one is we don't really know what people are subscribing to. They could be on a plan that's 5 years old at 50 meg or something like that, and not even be able to get that high. The other thing too that really happens a lot is a lot of times people think their internet service is really poor, but really what they're suffering from is a bad Wi-Fi experience in the home. If you're running on a 5-year-old $30 Wi-Fi router from Walmart, that really doesn't cut it. You're probably 2 or 3 iterations behind on Wi-Fi standards, and if you've got an older home, if that device is not optimally situated in the home, just the Wi-Fi signal alone, because a lot of people are just running this stuff off their phone anymore. So it's really difficult to say, absolutely that these speed tests are, below what they're saying they are. Most cable coax networks don't have any problem delivering 100 by 20 service consistently. And honestly, I would put Midco at the top of the heap for cable companies in Minnesota. So.
The last comment I would make is you're absolutely correct on the wireless routers. And there are 5G wireless routers, 5th generation wireless routers that are now available that improve drastically or dramatically in the home use of Wi-Fi. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I live in a farmhouse that was built in 1952, and we recently got a new Wi-Fi 6 router, and it is amazing what that thing did compared to what I had before. So, and honestly, we're seeing a lot of companies that are starting to do a managed in-home Wi-Fi. It's a way for them to collect a few extra bucks a month, but also it really reduces their operational expenses. If you think about the cost to drive out to somebody's house to send a tech out there, to probably half the time it's as simple as unplug it and plug it back in and it works. If you can do all that remotely with a customer service tech, that really makes their life a lot easier, and we're seeing more and more companies go that route.
Chris, this is Tom Schultzenberg. Thanks for your work on this. I just need a little help in understanding a couple things. As Dan was saying, it sounds like without outside funding, this might be cost prohibitive for the city. What, in your opinion, then, is the future of these households that don't have the mark 100 by 20 as you describe, and what can we expect for the future in terms of Midco CenturyLink working together to improve internet service for our residents if we don't have access to
Yep.
funds for a
So-
grander plan?
So there's a couple things out there on the horizon. So if we look at that 380, I'm getting my numbers mixed up here.
13.
313, if we look at that 313 passings, and then we take out the 30 from RDOF, which they have, Midco has been approved by the FCC and will start getting funding. And then they gave us some maps of another couple of small projects they have that will total 97 passings. That will leave 188 passings. So those 188 passings are eligible for, fill in the blank funding mechanism. They seem to be coming out of the sky right now. The most immediate one would be the Minnesota Border to Border program. That will literally drop any day now. That's a $35 million pot administered by the Department of Economic Development. And then there'll be a second round later this year, early next, that will put an additional $35 million. So my recommendation would be to work with the MIGCOs, the CenturyLinks in your area and ask them what they need in support to, put in grant applications to get that number shored up. Because those are, the future is a lot brighter for those areas, as far as getting fiber goes. The other option that's out there is ARPA, state and local fiscal recovery funds. I don't know if you, at a city level, have allocated any of that. I know that Anoka County is also looking at a feasibility study, and part of that will be looking at what areas are eligible to be built out with ARPA money from the county, those state and local fiscal recovery funds. So you could possibly look at partnering with Midco or Century on a county grant situation here in the near future as well.
Thank you.
And both Midco and CenturyLink, when we talked to them, they were very receptive to working with the county. So it would be they may ask for a small monetary donation from the city. When we look at the state border to border grant, they call it the three-legged stool. They like to see buy-in from the public, private, and the local government. So that being, the provider, the resident, and then, some other funding partner they like to see come in there. Quite often that's the county or the city. And it doesn't have to be a huge amount of money. We've often seen it kind of scales with the size of the project and budget, but, something in the neighborhood of $10,000 to $50,000, depending on how big of a project they would propose, might be enough to get it done. And it's not that they need that little bit of extra money. It's they need those dollars to get the extra points to separate them from the competition. These grants are highly competitive, and just wringing every single point out of them that you can is how you get a leg up on your competition.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I just have one short follow-up question. Many of the businesses require something above this 120 mark. What did you find with businesses that are lacking or have sufficient speed? I'm thinking especially along the 65 corridor.
Yep, that is an area that we, I think, identified in the study is that the businesses may be suffering. The issue there is how you define a business, and I'm not saying this to be right or wrong or whatever, but as an economy and as a workplace, we're seeing more and more businesses move to remote and work at home type positions. So when you look at this type of stuff, in reality, you could have a registered, 1 out of 3 castings in your area might have a registered business or something that would maybe need a higher service. But when you look at it from the broadband side, these providers often charge a premium for what they would call business service. And so now it's not your $60, $70, $80 a month. It's $100, maybe up to $500 a month for something like a gigabit. So Midco and CenturyLink do offer that type of service. From what I spoke to them with, they do have fiber in the area that they can turn up those types of services with. It's just going to come at a premium that, smaller businesses may not be able to handle.
Thank you.
I'm Catherine Landcrane, EDA Commissioner. I guess I had some questions about where you got some of the background information about the individuals who are already served. My area currently, some of us are served by Midco and some of us have essentially a snail service and haven't had anything better, but there are some projects that suggest that this is going to come in now, at least for some of the homes in our area. But I know that a lot of the city seems less served than what your maps seem to suggest. And so I don't know, I guess I'm just wondering where the information came from. And
I'm sorry, I'm not picking all that up. If there's a question there, I just can't hear it.
I guess I'm wondering where you got the information about the areas already served, because it sounded like you thought that the areas, or that your information provided that most of the areas were well served. And I guess my experience is people around me, that's not what we're expressing here in the city, that we're not well served.
I'm sorry, I'm still not picking any of that up.
Chris, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, Catherine's question was, she's wondering where you received or derived the information on those household serves. The area that she's currently living in has no service from Midco or CenturyLink. It's at the end of the line on a Midco service. It is one of the areas, though, that Midco has identified for future service. But her question is, where did you get the information on the number of households served?
So that's a combination of the FCC's 477 data and the state of Minnesota deed data. Every year, actually every 6 months, the providers are required to submit maps and shapefiles of the areas that they serve. We can't possibly, at the time and scale of these things, go out and verify, every individual location. We often default to the Minnesota deed maps in Minnesota, just because we do find them to be more accurate. The federal stuff is limited to census blocks, which creates some problems. As far as not having any service at all, CenturyLink is really obligated as a carrier of last resort. They are getting funding from Universal Services to serve areas. If you don't, if they are refusing to offer you service, that's a complaint that needs to be filed with the PUC.
I do believe a lot of us have the CenturyLink service, but the CenturyLink service is, like I said, it's a very slow-paced service.
And then I guess as far as counting the locations, that's a matter of truing those boundaries up against the city's E911 address layer database.
Chris, this is Julie Lux again. So the maps that you're showing us, so you said you often default to the MinDeed maps. So are those?
This one here. Yep.
Okay.
Can you click the got it so we can see the whole screen?
Okay, so that's the mid-deed map, okay. Thank you.
And we do try to spot check these when we do our write outs. But it's just, again, it's really difficult to, we usually budget about 2 to 3 days for something like this, and it's just hard to document
Yeah,
that granular detail in that time frame. Usually we're just saying, okay, it generally looks like, because we can see whose PEDs are in the right of way, or how many lines are on an aerial line, and we kind of note that and just say, hey, it appears there's cable in these general areas, and it appears that there's not in these areas, and that's kind of where we leave it at usually.
any other questions or comments from anyone? Okay. And this is just for informational purposes only,
That's
correct, Jack?
Chris, thank you for your time tonight. We appreciate the update. The report that Doug Dawson sent me on Friday will be forwarded to the EDA and City Council for their kind of review and comment, and then we look forward to hearing from you at the conclusion of this here in a month or so.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right.
I just have a couple little updates,
Yes.
especially in Catherine's situation and in Chris's reference to the grants. We currently have access to one grant already, and that's that ARPA Physical Recovery Funds that the county has. That's the one we discussed at the November meeting,
Right.
where the county does have $150,000 in grant funds available to the city for purposes of broadband extension and improvements. Catherine's area would be one place that would qualify for that. Midco has already identified that and identified an area off of Klondike, another one back over here off 222nd Avenue that need to have either improved new service or extended service from Midco. The city would have to match that dollar for dollar. But now Midco would be putting in a substantial portion of that, and then we would be providing the construction aid to make it feasible. So I think when we looked at and talked at it at the November meeting, we'd have to come up with like about $30,000 or $40,000 locally. The county would provide a match to that, and then Midco would supply the rest of the funds.
Okay.
So, that's something that we wanted to wait until we got the results of this report before we acted on. So, they probably got another 30 days to finish some things up. So after that time, and we have until December 2023 to apply for and use this money. So we still got plenty of time. And actually, we've talked to Midco about these 3 project areas, and they're on board to try to service them if we can come up with the construction aid.
Okay.
So the city portion would match the $150,000 from the county?
Yeah, let's say that the project.
So there's like Catherine's area, there's Fish Meadows, there's a couple.
Yeah, let's just say in a specific area that the cost for getting it was $100,000. And Midco's feasibility on it would be to provide $60,000. So then we would use $20,000 of the county grant, match that with $20,000 of city money, and then we could do the project.
And we'll write a check to Catherine if she needs more.
I guess what's kind of hard here is, though, it sounds like Chris is saying that he feels our whole city is well-served, and I feel most of us feel it's not. And so I'm confused about the data, about where it's coming from. And I mean, again, they're an outlying firm, and I'm hopeful also that they couldn't mess anything up for us, for lack of a better whatever, because we do have Midco wanting to expand in our area, and then we have some access to different funds and things. And I mean,
That's why I was asking, where are they measuring this
Right.
speed at? Is it at the house, is it at the node? And if I didn't up my service with Midco to whatever I upped it to,
Right.
it would be slower than it is, even though I've got a new router and all that other stuff, so.
And,
And I think what he said too was that in certain areas though, the minimum and max speed wasn't anywhere near that 100
One-
download, 25 upload.
Yeah,
And if you went into those areas and did those speed surveys, then you could make justification then to apply for certain grant funds. So, I think there's still opportunities out there if we find certain areas that we can determine are significantly underserved, identify those and then go after some funding for it.
well, I'm looking at 313 pathways that don't exist out of 4,900, so there's 7% of the
Yeah.
rooftops that don't have service
Right.
or pathways at all, so.
Mhm.
that's what's challenging.
I'm assuming that's what pathway means,
Yeah.
it doesn't go there,
Yeah, I
so.
think he's
Yeah.
calling those pass-bys, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah.
But no, it is, this is something that wasn't gonna come out and say, okay, this house is served, this isn't, they go with this data, but I think there's still pockets within that though, that are going to be still somewhat underserved. And,
Right.
you know, if we can identify those and do the next step surveys to show what the speed tests are and the deficiencies are, then there's a good probability that we can qualify for some of this grant money.
Okay.
And by the way, the report I will be sending out to you, what they have completed so far is 169 pages, so make good reading for the weekend.
Have the CSO drop it off, I don't want to download that. Catherine can't download it.
It'll just take a while. It'll just
Yeah.
take a while.
I'll have printed copies delivered to everybody.
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah.
Will some
Send
of
a
the
link and it'll
findings-
take me a week to download it.
Will some of the findings from the report be able to be used for these grant applications in the future?
They
Because I
certainly,
would hate to see all this work being put into it and
Right.
we're like, oh, we gotta now do a survey or something.
no,
and
they
some gathering
certainly
information.
will, and having studies done like this are the keys to getting grant monies, because
Okay.
we've taken the first step to identify the problems. And even though it shows on a general level that the city is primarily mostly served, we recognize and realize there are still pockets of underserved areas. So we've done the first step, and when they go to approve these grant funds, they want to see these studies done from the 50,000-foot level all the way down to the 50-foot level to be able to justify the request for the funds.
But if their study indicates that we're very well served, could that screw up the potential?
No,
for us?
because that's a general statement, because they have to rely on data from
Okay.
deed and from what the FCC
Right.
477 information. So that just indicates that overall, in this area, it does appear to be fairly well served, but there can be pockets or areas within that area that are not.
And the grant is a targeted response to these, it's not a citywide thing like he was proposing, putting in fiber all over.
That's correct. It'll probably be directed for very small, specific areas.
It'll be split up between different.
And at the November meeting, we discussed 3 of those, and they were very small, and I think it
Yeah.
was a total of like 56. So, you know, there's 20% of what we've already identified. So, but we just have to make sure we can find these areas, get the survey work done, and then move on from there.
Even some of his information, like my understanding from talking to my neighbors and learning things is CenturyLink is not interested in providing residential improved residential service. Like I have them as my provider
Yeah.
now because I have to. They're the only ones who will offer it to me, and it stinks. But they've also said they're not going to help anybody outside of somebody being willing to pay them a huge dividend to do it. They're not going to help anybody get better service as a homeowner. They're interested in helping businesses.
One of the things, and I've only just kind of scanned the report, one of the big concerns for this area is that since Midco is the main provider, that there's the danger of them becoming almost a monopoly in this
Right.
area. And what they were encouraging the city to do is work with others so there would be some competition. And I think that's a very key element too. You know, they don't have to cover all the city, but you know, if they have some presence in here, we all know what competition is a great thing. So it provides better service and lower costs, so.
Absolutely.
So this is something we'll keep working on. The final report will probably be finished at the end of April.
Okay,
And we'll get them back to do a final presentation, but I will get you all that draft copy out, in a printed form this week. And if you can, if you just kind of take a review of it, look at it, if you have any comments, get them back to me, and then I'll funnel them all back to Finley.
okay. All right, thank you. Anything else on 4.0? Are we ready to move on? So we'll jump, we covered 5.0, let's jump to 6.0, approval of the February 15th, 2022 EDA meeting minutes. I just have one correction before we jump in. On page 3, item 6.0, just change November 15th, 2022 to November 15th, 2021. And any other changes or comments? If not,
I move
Do I
we
hear
adopt
hear
the
motion?
February 15th, 2022 EDA minutes as corrected.
do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Any other changes? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
No, and Tom is abstaining. All right, motion carries. All right. Item 7, business activity report. And Stephanie.
Just a quick one this month. So just wanted to give a couple updates on some projects that are going on. One of them's the Panagold Country Hearth Building. That certificate of occupancy was issued about 1.5 weeks ago. So they're moving in. We have Aggressive Hydraulics. As you know, they're putting on an addition. That will be finalized probably within the next 2 to 4 weeks, and we're thinking that CO will be issued at that time too. And then also Village Apartments, the second one, we're thinking 1 to 2 weeks for that certificate of occupancy. They just have a few items that they're working on for fire and building and planning departments, and then that will be ready to go as well. And it looks like they already have about 80% occupied as of a couple weeks ago. And they're ready for people to move in April 1st. So we're hoping the next week they'll have their certificate.
Can you remind me when Quick Trip will be breaking ground, or when will that start?
Yeah, Quick Trip will be breaking ground about this time next year.
Okay, so 2023, okay. All right.
How about Elevage?
Elevage, we haven't heard much on that one, unless you've talked to Corey. But
No, as like we reported the last time, Corey said I think Corey's still kind of exploring some things with interest rates and working with certain builders because he won't actually be the builder. He did say that he hoped to have his plans in April, so
Okay.
we'll hopefully you'll be able to get those to us by then.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. And we'll move on to item 8, AC Red cost sharing agreement.
so the county, the city, and the other community partners enter into a memorandum of agreement, which we call MOU, on January 1st of 2019, where we set goals, create an action plan, and implement shared objectives in promoting economic development within Anoka County. And this is done through the Anoka County Regional Economic Development Board. Samantha Markman is the director of ACRID, and Anoka County covers her personnel costs. The MOU addresses the need and means for cost sharing between the county and its cities and townships to support continued services for the website, social media support, marketing assistance, and other services related to the countywide economic development initiative. There's a budget for the above activities. It's prepared annually and provides a formula for each participating municipality to provide a cost sharing based upon its population. The budget for services related to the website, social media marketing, and other supportive activities require ACRID for their economic development is currently set at $20,750 for the calendar year of 2022. East Bethel is requested to contribute 0.057 cents per resident as their share of the 2022 economic development costs as described above. And for the purpose of this calculation, the population size of the city is based upon the Metropolitan Council's most recent population estimate. So the East Bethel EDA is requested to approve a recommendation to the City Council for the approval of the 2022 voluntary cost sharing agreement and the approval of the payment of the 2022 economic development cost share invoice.
I have a question.
Mhm.
I'm looking at the budget for all of the cities, and it shows that East Bethel's portion at 5.7 cents per resident is $676,
Yes.
and the invoice is for $672. So did we lose like 80 residents?
We got a $4 credit for being a good partner.
Did we? Okay. Or do we need to just approve up to $700 in case the number's not right?
The invoice number would be the correct number.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Just thought I'd check. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the participation in the ACRID cost-sharing agreement as proposed to us by Stephanie in the amount of $672.
And then you made a motion to approve the agreement as well as it is stated. So we need to approve the agreement.
Oh, okay, yeah, I see that. I'm sorry. I was just
Okay.
thinking about the do-re-mi, so I'd like to amend that to also approve the cost-sharing agreement.
All right. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? If none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. And we're down to item 9, City Council report.
I'll just do kind of a brief
Okay.
update. The city's getting ready to start work again on the 2023 budget. We have a union contract. It's up for renegotiation. That process will start next week, and we'll have hopefully a preliminary budget prepared and ready for council discussion the 1st of July. Also, the city is having their local board of assessment and equalization meeting on April the 25th, I believe. So if anyone has any issues with their property tax valuation, this is the meeting to come to present it to council to request a readjustment. It can only be done once a year, and this is the time to do it. So that's my city council report.
And town hall meeting.
Oh, yeah, the town hall meeting is what date?
I would have to look at the calendar.
Was it the 14th?
The 14th,
Yeah.
yes, April 14th.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
a Thursday,
Got it.
Thursday, April 14th.
Right.
Okay.
And just a reminder also that the chamber golf outing is going to be September 9th.
Mark your calendars.
Mark your calendars.
All right. All right. Well, we're at the end of our agenda. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? Anyone? Catherine, thank you. All in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned.